morning. Welcome to this morning's webinar. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and we have for you today our webinar on work zone traffic control. This is the first of a 5-part series, and if you haven't had an opportunity yet, please pull up on your computer or on your smartphone menti.com and enter the code that's shown on the screen, 5140786, and then it'll allow you to start voting on the different questions we're going to have throughout the presentation today. We're attempting to try to make this much more interactive than we have with previous webinars, so we're hoping that you will participate in the voting process and the responses to the questions that Ray is going to have for you throughout this morning's session. Your presenter for the day is Ray Brushart, and he normally teaches this as a full day course. So it's important if you want credit for the entire class to be on all 5 sessions. But Ray has taught this class all over the state, and if he doesn't have the answer ready for you on a work zone question, he will definitely find that out. So we're happy to have you as a part of our audience. One quick thing, if you wouldn't mind doing this for me, if you could please look for your question box, and please go ahead and enter a hi or hello in there so I know that you know where that's at. We're going to be taking questions through there throughout the presentation. And then at the very end, Ray does have a screen where he's going to collect additional questions. But I know he'll stop periodically to ask me for questions in the question box. And I want to make certain that we're able to have questions in there from you to ask him if you have them while he's presenting. So looks like we've got a really good mix going there, Ray. Lots of folks from city government, state government, our MPOs, township, county consultants. So, all right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to, one additional thing. Since we were using the polling software, we will be sending out a copy of the presentation from today after the event is over with. We wanted to make sure we had the responses to the polls included in there for you. So anyway, that's all I have right now, Ray. You ready?
Yes, I am.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Victoria. Well, good morning, everybody. As Victoria was saying, my name is Ray Brushart. I'm a safety circuit rider in the Ohio LTAP Center. And in case you didn't know, Ohio LTAP is it's an office within the Ohio Department of Transportation in the Planning Division. And I see we've got people voting here and plenty of representatives from the cities and state, and we've even got one from the county, one from township, and we got some consultants and a representative from the MPO or RTPO. That's very good. Hopefully the other half of the class will figure out how to vote on these, because we're using this Mentimeter software just to get more interaction, so it'll be more fun for you if you go ahead and use your laptop or your smartphone to go to menti.com and type in that code. Every time we ask a question, there'll be a code up there, I guess. So, all right, let's see here. So, all right, so today's class is work zone traffic control and safety. And we're going to be focusing today on setting up work zones for your maintenance activities. Roadway maintenance activities is mainly for local governments. I know we got plenty of people on here from the state, but we're going to focus on local streets, local roadways, and 2-lane rural roadways most of the time. And there's my information on the screen there, my email address and phone number. So a little bit about this workshop. It's intended to review the basic elements and typical applications of work zones for temporary traffic control. We'll learn that work zones are made up of different parts or elements and how they all tie together so that we can move traffic around our work zones safely and efficiently. And we'll be also today we'll be getting into the different temporary traffic control devices that we use out there, like our cones and drums, barricades, other things like our flashing Aero boards or safety devices that you may or may not be familiar with, like attenuators. And eventually we'll get into the flagging procedures. We're not going to get into flagging in depth today, but we will, I think, in part 4 of this 5-part webinar series. We'll be getting familiar with part 6 of the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That's what OMUTCD stands for. And we'll learn that it's also called the Temporary Traffic Control Manual. We'll also learn that there's 9 parts to the OMUTCD, and each part focuses on some type of traffic control. So the OMUTCD is all about traffic control. So like part 2 is all about your permanent roadway signs, and part 3 is like your pavement markings. Part 4 has the traffic signals, and then there's a part for school zones, and there's a part for railroad crossings. It's all about uniformity. So as you drive through a school zone, you should see the same signs as all the other school zones, or as you approach a railroad crossing, depending on where that railroad crossing is and how many lanes and stuff, you should see very similar signage as you approach these railroad crossings. It's because all of these situations are mentioned in the OMUTCD. And then part 6 of that manual is all about work zones, which can also be called temporary traffic control. We'll also be looking at different types of roadway, mainly rural roadways and urban roadways. And we'll note that there are several differences between these 2 types of roads, and especially of how we set up our work zones in these locations. So our learning objectives today, hopefully we'll be learning a basic understanding and awareness of temporary traffic control concepts, and we'll be talking about the standards involved for temporary traffic control. Standards is a very important word. It's a word that's tied to each of our typical applications in our temporary traffic control manual. It has to do with a minimum level of safety that is part of each one of these 46 different work zone situations, depending on the type of road, whether it's a 2-lane road, maybe it's up to a freeway and everything in between, and maybe intersections. And then also we'll be realizing the importance of setting up our work zone properly, the way that this manual tells us to, so that we can make our work zones as safe as possible for both the workers and the motorists and all other road users, from pedestrians to the big trucks, etc. So the way this webinar series is going to work, we'll start out talking about fundamental principles of temporary traffic control, and then we'll get into our the remainder of the day today will be focusing in on different traffic control devices and safety hardware. And then our next work zone webinar will be all about the elements of a traffic control plan and work zone traffic control layouts. And then we'll be talking about flagging and moving and mobile operations. Then we'll get into street closures, how to do that properly. And then we'll also, on our last day, we'll have a design workshop where we'll be using all of everything we learned over the series, and we'll be looking at some different situations, and we'll be discussing how to set up a work zone in these different situations. All right, let's have another question here. So why don't you tell me a little bit about why you have such an interest in work zone traffic control, that you're participating in our webinar series. You can just go to menti.com and type in that code at the top, 5140786, and then you can actually just type in an answer. or
Yep,
2 or 3?
and if they already loaded it for the previous question, they
Uh-huh.
don't have to re-enter that
Oh,
code.
okay, that's good.
Yeah, their phone or computer should just say that the presenter has moved to the next one, next question, and it'll refresh their screen. Oh, and let's see, someone is currently in full screen view. You just need to hit the escape button to get out of full screen view. Okay, Ray, sorry, I'll be quiet now so you can comment on what they're putting in.
All right, the first answer that popped up said to assist customers who submit permitting applications. You know, I haven't always worked at LTAP or ODOT. I spent 15 years at the City of Columbus in their traffic engineering division. So one of my tasks there was to review permit applications. So, you know, I made sure that they had the proper maintenance of traffic notes and things like that on their permit so that they knew that they would be required to set up the proper work zone traffic control as they perform the work. And as we go through the session, I'll be showing you, I think, either in the next session or the one after that, about where you can find a bunch of maintenance of traffic notes. And that will be on the Office of Roadway Engineering's page. They are loaded with work zone information. Let's see, safety of workers, safety. What else? Construction inspection. Okay, we're getting a lot of answers. I worked on streets and traffic. All right. All right, see a lot of safety. So we're definitely going to focus on safety, not just for the workers, but for the motorists as well, and how to, you know, what is the minimum level of safety for each typical application, and also how to enhance it, enhance the safety with different devices, or um, you know, adding more devices, or in some situations maybe having a police officer on hand with their lights turned on. So these are all examples of how to enhance safety. So all right, quality control, very good. All right, so these are very good answers. Okay, so let's start out today with lesson 1. We're going to talk about the fundamental principles of temporary traffic control, and we'll be exploring some different reference manuals that you should all know about, and how to get your own copies of or view them online. And we'll talk about some roadway safety statistics when it comes to work zones, like crash statistics, what kind of crashes usually happen in work zones, and what we can do to uh, lessen the number of those types of crashes. Okay. First of all, what is the purpose of temporary traffic control? So we got our top 4 purposes of temporary traffic control. One is we need to warn the motorists, pedestrians, or all road users that we are out there working on the roadways and on the streets, and they need to know that we're there before they arrive at our work zone, so that they can adjust their driving, maybe slow down, pay more attention. We need to advise them of the proper travel path around our work zones, and we need to make sure that we use the proper temporary traffic control devices to delineate the areas for them not to use, and to make sure we do a good job of separating their travel area from our work area. And we define our temporary traffic control in our work zones as a system to communicate with road users to safely guide them through a roadway affected by construction and reconstruction, maintenance activities, utility operations, disasters, special events, and incidents. So sometimes we're not just using our temporary traffic control for work zones. Sometimes we have special events. You know, sooner or later we'll get back to a normal life and have things like 4th of July events and Labor Day parades and things like that. So maybe some of you that work in the cities or villages, you're familiar with setting up road closures and things like that to allow these events to take place. So where do all of these rules and regulations come from that tell us how to set up our work zones properly? Well, I guess you could say they come straight from the top, from the U.S. Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. They publish our national manual on uniform traffic control devices, and there's a picture on the screen of Part 6 of the national manual, and it is applicable to all roads open to public travel. And so every state in the nation, they have a choice to make, either simply abide by the national manual or publish their own OMUTCD. And that's what Ohio has elected to do. So ODOT publishes the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So this is the manual we use to help us design all of our traffic situations. Like I said, there's 9 different parts to this manual, and this is what it looks like in its entirety. And you'll notice that the latest edition is the 2012 edition. So yeah, that's 8 years old, isn't it? And if you may have noticed, the national manual was the 2009 edition. So they are working really hard to come up with the next edition, but they're doing a lot of research to, they don't just want to simply roll out something that was just like the one before. So there's a lot of research going on, research projects to try to make some of the typical applications safer, like the mobile operations. For instance, they want to do a study of how can they make mobile operations safer, and then take that information and put that into the typical application. And so this is part 6 of the OMUTCD, otherwise known as the Temporary Traffic Control Manual. Some people call it the Orange Book, but again, it's the 2012 edition. The OMUTCD establishes the standards for design and use of traffic control devices on all public roads in Ohio. And it says so right in the Ohio Revised Code, which makes it a state law, in sections 4511.09 through 4511.11. And that part of the Ohio Revised Code states that local authorities in their respective jurisdictions shall place and maintain traffic control devices in accordance with the Department of Transportation manual and specifications for a uniform system of traffic control devices. So herein lies the legal reason as to why we use the manual as the basis for the design of our work zones, and also the design of all of our traffic control situations, like school zones, railroad crossings, our stop signs at intersections, or anything you can think of, our traffic signals. And so it's also the basis for a lot of court cases. If there's a crash that happens in a work zone, a lot of times the people in the crash, they want to sue somebody, right? And so they're going to hire an attorney, and that attorney is going to get his hands on the crash report that either the local police or the state highway patrol or county sheriff filled out, and they're going to review that and see if the work zone was set up the way the temporary traffic control manual wanted it to be set up. So a lot of times these cases get settled out of court, but that's just another reason as to why you need to set up your work zones the way this manual tells us to. So to rehash what we've learned about the OMUTCD, it is published by ODOT. Part 6 of the manual deals with temporary traffic control zones. And the manual receives input from a statewide committee made up of public and private sector officials, and they meet on a quarterly basis. And that is to make sure that if there were any changes, for instance, to the national manual, then we have a certain amount of time where we need to update our manual to reflect those changes, because the OMUTCD must meet or exceed all of the specifications in the national manual. Okay, as we get more familiar with the typical applications in the temporary traffic control manual, we'll see that there's a drawing for each typical application that shows the proper signs and the taper location and other things like oh, what else? The space between signs, things like that. And then there's a page that goes with it. And that page details what the standards are. And that's the shall condition. That's the minimum level of safety that you must meet. So you shall install the signage and things like that per the standards. And then we can enhance the safety levels of your work zone by utilizing things that are mentioned in the guidance portion and in the options. You know, the options usually detail different pieces of equipment or suggest the use of law enforcement officers on the scene and things like that. So we'll get some good practice with the standards, guidance, and options in this webinar. So as we look at the manual, we'll see that all the standards are shown in a large bold text, and the guidance are shown in the usually in italics, and then the options are shown in a smaller size text. So if you don't have access to a temporary traffic control manual, here is how you can get your own copy. You can get a physical copy of this manual by calling ODOT, the Office of Contracts. It's on the first floor of ODOT at 1980 West Broad Street, Columbus. And you can call them at the 1-800 number there at the bottom of the screen, 1-800-459-3778. And I believe they're $12 per manual. And you can also view this manual online at any time you want on the ODOT website. There's several places within the ODOT website to find it, but I'll be showing you some places here, especially right on the Ohio LTAP website on our programs and resources page. There are direct links to the OMUTCD and some other reference manuals on that page. How about this book here is another resource. And this book was mainly created for roadway maintenance activities. It's just a little booklet. It obviously doesn't have all the information that the large manual has, but it has some very good information in it, like I said, for roadway maintenance activities. Are any of you guys familiar with this, or have you used this before? Here's a question for Menti. You can say, yes, I have the laminated flip book, or I use the app on my phone, or no, and how do I find these?
Ray, we're gonna have to work on getting more people to download the app.
Yes, we'll.
Because it can always be there on your phone, and it'll always be up to date.
Let's see if it's still there. They didn't take it down or anything, did
Oh,
they?
no, it's there. They just published an update to it like 2 weeks ago on a Saturday.
Okay, so if I go to my Google Play and type in Ohio work zone, let's see what that does. I see OGO. Someone told me that
I know on the Apple Store they just updated it 2 weeks ago on a Saturday. All right, well, why don't you just show everybody where to find
Okay.
it?
All right. I shall do that. That sounds like a good
Okay.
idea.
Good.
All right. So if I escape out of here, can you see my screen, Victoria? The LTAP page?
Well, I think my computer's running a little slow today because I still see the, well, I see Mentimeter, but hopefully others are seeing your page. Maybe somebody could drop a comment in the question box and let me know if they're, yeah, they're seeing your LTAP page. There you go.
Okay. So here's the LTAP homepage. As you can see in the top left corner, we are part of ODOT. And so when you get to the Ohio LTAP page, the home page, you'll see this column over here on the right has lots of things to click on. And if you a little bit more than halfway down, you'll see resources and programs. So if you click on resources and programs, you'll get to our that page, and then you can scroll down. Lots of resources. You got to scroll down, and you'll see here's the guidelines for traffic control and work zone smartphone app. You can click on that for information. And then you can also click on the booklet here, and it'll show you how to order these or download it. And then here's the direct link to the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So if you click on that, you can go to, we have an entire page dedicated to the OMUTCD. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you see you have direct links to each part of the manual, all 9 parts, and also the appendices. So those are some of the helpful resources that you'll find on the Ohio LTAP page. All right, let's get back to the Menti here. All right, so this little green flip book, Guidelines for Traffic Control and Work Zones, this has got a lot of helpful information in it. So if you open it up, you'll see different pages. Some show the pictures of the latest specs for different devices, like our different types of cones and drums, barricades. There's also on page 17 this very important table here. And that's not full screen, is it? There. So this table is very important for setting up your work zones. It shows you the a chart that goes into detail about how far apart should your series of signs be in feet. And then the next one is the spacing of your cones or channelizing devices. And then the big table at the bottom helps you figure out the length of your cone taper. And then the pictures to the right here are both 2 different typical applications that are very common for roadway maintenance activities. The first one here is the typical application number 10, which is titled Lane Closure on a 2-lane road using flaggers. Typical application number 10 shows you exactly how to lay out your flagging operation, the signs, the spacing of the signs, length of the cone taper, shows a buffer space, and the length of the buffer space can be determined by using this bottom table over here. And then the far right one shows you the setup on a typical mobile operations on a 2-lane road. And you'll notice in the manual it shows mobile operations on 2-lane roads. It also shows mobile operations on a shoulder. It even shows mobile operation on a multi-lane roadway. So those are some good examples of what's in the Green Book. Also, the back pages of this booklet, it has a work activity matrix to help you select your typical application for whatever work day. So as you can see here, it says pothole patching. If you're patching potholes on a 2-lane road, you're probably either going to use typical application number 10 or 11. And 10 is flagging, and we just saw that on the previous page, and 11 is for how to set up your operation on a low volume roadway. And of course, there's more pages for that. This is just one of the pages, so it shows more that above typical application number 20. Tree removal, trenching has several. It just depends on the roadway situation. Mowing, that's a good one this time of year. Just depends on the location of the mower itself. Is the mower, if you're using TA-1, that means the mower is safely off the roadway and off the shoulder. And you know, TA-6 is if the mower is on the shoulder of the roadway. TA-17 would be in situations where the mower is actually in the lane of travel on a 2-lane road. So that becomes a mobile operation at that point. So, so this work activity matrix guides you through the process of selecting a typical application. And so if you want to order copies, like I just showed you, you can go to our LTAP website and look at the order form or call us, or you can also call the ODOT Office of Contracts. The last I checked, these are like $3 each, but if you're going to order a whole bunch, the price per copy goes down. And so, again, the phone number there is 1-800-459-3778. And again, that's Office of Contracts, and it's not just for these booklets. If there's other reference manuals that you want, you could order copies of them too through that number. Local standards. This is definitely going to come in handy for especially the ones that work in the cities. I know when I worked for the city of Columbus, you know, I first worked at ODOT, then I went to the city, and that's where I discovered that our temporary traffic control manual is great if you work for the state because all the pictures look like state routes. Well, it didn't take long to figure out at the city that there really are no typical applications that look like High Street or Front Street or 3rd Avenue or 4th Avenue. And can you guys think of some things? What am I talking about? Can you guys think of some differences between state routes and local streets or roadways? Think about it for a minute. I should have put a Menti question there. So I'm talking about things like on-street parking or
Somebody said signals in the question box.
yeah, signals are a lot of the traffic. When you look at signalized intersections in the manual, it's hard to find an intersection that looks just like the one you want, the one you're working at. So you have to piece together pieces of different typical applications for the signalized intersections, like maybe,
They said
you know,
street markings too.
yeah, okay, pavement markings, yeah. So there's things like on-street parking or driveways that are really close together. When you look at the typical applications, you don't see any driveways. Intersections that are close together, like in the downtown area. You know, if you put together your tapers and sign spacing, the way a lot of these are laid out in the typical applications, it doesn't take very long for you to realize that you're backing up into another intersection. And so, you know, what you really need to do is to develop your own local standards and come up with some drawings of your own and give them to your street crews. Dublin, Ohio, they've done a really good job of this. They have their own booklet that they give their roadway workers. They show actual examples of things like Emerald Parkway and Rings Road and Also the roundabouts. Dublin's has become quite famous for all the roundabouts. The thing about the OMUTCD, they don't have any typical applications that show you roundabouts. And so that's definitely something that if you have roundabouts, then you need to come up with some drawings. And there are, if you do just a little research, Google how to close lanes in a roundabout, you'll see that a lot of different states already have typical applications developed, but they're just not in the OMUTCD yet. Indiana has them, Iowa, Virginia, and Dublin has they have different sizes of roundabouts. They have 1-lane roundabouts, they have 2-lane roundabouts, and of course they have that new one there at Riverside Drive, and 161 has got 3 lanes in the middle. So anyway, those are some very good reasons as to why you need local standards, so that your street crew is on the same page as the management, and they know what's expected of them, how to set up their work zones in those areas, and have the proper signage and other equipment to go along with those setups. Okay, let's talk about some safety concerns, and we'll look at some crash statistics. I have the latest crash statistics from 2019 about crashes in work zones. So try to think about, I know it's not a fun question to think about, but how many fatal crashes do you think happened in Ohio's work zones last year? So would it be 0, 8, 16, 38, or 72? I've got a Menti question here. So how about you all take a crack at guessing how many fatal crashes occurred last year in our work zones?
I sure wish it was 0.
Yes,
That's
we
our
all wish
goal.
it was 0, yes.
Yes, it's the only
Would you tell them
acceptable
a little
goal.
bit about that initiative?
Yeah, there's the Toward Zero Deaths initiative, and we are actually working with the safety section. I've been emailing with them even this morning on setting up a webinar to further explain what it is and how it's working, or is supposed to work here in Ohio. But it's the goal of getting to 0 deaths. They have looked nationally, and there's a national, goal for airline flying, flying on the airplanes that is 0. And they feel that there really is only one acceptable goal here, and anywhere across the world for traffic fatalities, and that's 0. So, I mean, I definitely wouldn't want it to be somebody from my family. And I know everyone on here wouldn't want it to be anybody that they know or love, or is a friend even. Nobody would wish that on another human being. So that's what we all want to strive for. And Ray, I had a couple people that said they wanted you to give them just a few more seconds to answer on these mentees.
Okay.
So it is a new technology, but we're excited that so many people are using it to interact with the webinar, because, we can't all be in the room together, but, we're trying to make these sessions as interactive as we possibly can. So, and I like this scatter dot. I mean, to me, this kind of gives you a big visual. So. There's an optimistic person. Just put up 1 vote for 8. All right, Ray. So what was the answer?
Well, we all wish the answer was 0. Maybe we'd settle for it to be 1, right? So, but the bad news is it's not 1, it's not 0. The good news is it's not 72, and it's not 38. So last year we had 16 people lose their lives in crashes in work zones here in Ohio. So the number is 16. A little bit more about that. 16 used to be about our average. I've seen 14, 15, 16. I think 17 was kind of recent. 19, I think, was 2018. But for some reason, like in 2015 and 2016, it almost doubled those 2 years. We had like 28 and 29. So, really some outliers as far as the data goes. So, what do you think? Can you guys think of some reasons as to why you think back in 2015 or 2016 we had a much higher number of fatalities? Once you think about that for a little bit.
Do you want them to drop their thoughts in the question box and I'll read them off?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. But you'll have to mark this down as another spot. It would be
Yeah, we
good to
need
put another Menti in.
it would be a good Menti question. I could probably type it in real quick.
Oh, here. They said that one person feels that that was an increased number of fatalities because there was a lot more road work going on, that the economy was good. So there was actually more work out there, which increased the chances of them having crashes. And someone else commented that the cost of gas was low. So there were more people out driving.
Aha.
Oh, here's one, distracted driving. Absolutely. I wish people's phones would just shut off when their car starts.
Yes, that would be good.
So one person mentioned that apparently yesterday at the major projects meeting with an ODOT that they're seeing a increase in severe crashes since the pandemic began, but on the positive side, they've seen a decrease in fatalities. So even though the severe crashes are going up, the fatals have gone down. So maybe some of those fatals have been converted to severe crashes. And while nobody wants a severe crash, at least the people are still alive. Another person put in their DUI. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I was
Okay, you want
coming
me
home
to?
from
Okay.
vacation a few weeks ago, and Saturday morning about 1:30 we were almost home and encountered a shut down highway, and I just knew at that hour of the morning that there was a fatality up there with the highway shut down. And given the time of day, there was a good chance it was going to be a DUI. So,
Yeah.
all right, Ray.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if we want to take a closer look at the crashes in 2019, we compare work zone crashes to total crashes in Ohio. 16 were in work zones, but in total there was 1,155 fatalities on Ohio's roadway. So if you think about that, do you think that is that about an average number, or how would it compare? Here's a good question. How would the 1,155 fatalities in 2019 compare to the number of fatal crashes in Ohio if we get in the Wayback Machine and go back to 1969, for example? Would the number of fatalities in 1969 be lower or about the same, or would there have been more fatalities back then?
You can just put your thoughts. They say less now, lower now.
I'll wait and see.
That's what's coming in on the question box, right?
Mostly lower.
You lower, less now. Way,
Okay.
some people say there were way more in 69.
Yes. Okay. Well, they got it. The answer is there were a lot more fatalities in 1969. I think when I checked, I think there was 2,752 fatalities in 1969 on Ohio's roads. So that's a lot higher, even more than double. And so, why do you think we have less fatality? We wish it was zero, and we do all we can, but how do we get it to a lower number? And so I don't want to waste too much time here, but I know at ODOT in the safety office, we used to refer to the 4 E's of roadway safety. When I was talking to Jeremy Thompson, he says that there's even 6 E's of roadway safety now. But the 4 that I know about are education, enforcement, EMS for emergency medical services, and then engineering. So all these 4 E's of roadway safety work together to lower the number of crashes. So you can think of some public education things that you've seen, like billboards that say "click it or ticket" to let people know that wearing a seatbelt is the state law, and seatbelts definitely do save lives. 1/3 of that number of fatalities were people that could have used seatbelts, but they chose not to that day. So we still need to remind everybody to wear their seatbelt. Another one is drive sober or get pulled over. Maybe the punishment for getting caught drinking while driving back in 1969, well, it was definitely not as harsh as punishment is today, right? Today, people get a very high fine, like between the fine and paying for an attorney is over $10,000, I'm told. Plus, there's some jail time, weekend jail at least, and things like that. So that's dropped a lot of the drunk drivers from 1969, although we still have plenty of drunk drivers out there. What's another one? Another one is stop the texts, stop the wrecks. So that notifies people that it's against the law to text and drive. But of course, our smartphones today do more than just text, right? So I think there's a different level of from 2009 to today. There's a lot of difference between distracted driving. So people, maybe 2007 or something, they were just texting. But we all know that social media has arrived, and today's smartphones, you can check your Facebook page or your friend's Facebook page and respond to anything on Facebook while you're driving. Or, of course, there's several other social media pages out there as well. And so I think that has a lot to do with it as well. There's people that are actually addicted to their social media accounts. They can't set their phone down for not even a minute, seems like. So we got to do something about that. So then you can see what else was there? Emergency medical services. They've saved a whole lot of lives that maybe did not get saved back in 1969. We've got we arrive at the scene of the crash faster with our technology. Some cars will even notify emergency services when they crash. We also have the life flight helicopters that get crash victims to not just a regular hospital, but to a trauma center. They definitely save a lot of lives that way. So hats off to emergency medical services. And we have enforcement, the State Highway Patrol and local police, county sheriffs, they've really cracked down on drunk driving, but also drugged driving and speeding. If we look at the crash reports in work zones, we'll see that speeding is involved a lot of the time. The other one is following too closely. There's like an epidemic going on out there of people driving right up on the bumper of other cars. And when it comes to work zones, that is not a good thing, because the person in front might have to, for whatever reason, have to slam on their brakes for something going on in the work zone, which always results in a rear-end crash, which rear-end crashes can sometimes be just a fender bender, but it can also result in a serious injury or serious crash, especially when speeding is involved. And then we have the final E, which is engineering. Since 1969, we've re-engineered a lot of our roadways, like our high crash locations have we've had lots and lots of roadway safety improvements to make these roadways and intersections safer. And we pay a lot of attention to the crashes out there with our databases, and we're continually trying to make our roadways safer. So that's another reason as to why we have less fatal crashes. So those are the 4 E's of roadway engineering. So can we repeat what those were? Yeah, let's see. Education, enforcement, EMS, and engineering. So you can see some of the the data here from 2019 crashes. Besides the 16 fatalities, we had lots of other work zone crashes, 6,571 total, and there was 129 people seriously injured as well. And in the total crashes, you can see 297,054 total crashes. Those were reported crashes. Probably many more that were not reported. And so we just want to share this data to remind everybody that crashes do happen in work zones. And so the whole point of this is that to remind you that if you use the temporary traffic control manual and read it, find the typical application. It shows you exactly the signs to use and the spacing of the signs for the advanced warning area, and then the proper taper and things like that, and also the buffer space that is added to protect the workers as well. These are all very important things that we can lower the number of these crashes in our work zones if we adhere to the manual. And not just use the standards, but maybe upgrade the safety level to use the guidance and options as well. And as the webinar series continues, we'll be getting into what I mean when I say that. Okay, let's move on to lesson 2, which is all about the traffic control devices and safety hardware that we utilize in our work zones. First of all, what is the purpose of our traffic control devices, whether they're permanent or temporary? Their purpose is communication. How else could we communicate to the motorists that we're out there working on the roadways? We're not going to send them a text message or a Facebook update that we're working out there. Although ODOT does have a good Facebook page, by the way, you should all like it. But it's not like that would be the best way to let people know about our work zones out there, right? Because we don't want them looking at their phones. So it's very important that we utilize our traffic control devices according to the manual, because that is the best way to communicate to the motorists that we are out there working on the streets. However, sometimes even our best communication efforts fail because, well, let's just say, maybe you can agree with me, maybe not, but maybe we have some drivers out there that do some really stupid things. Has anybody ever seen a driver do something that's that you would consider to be stupid out there? Think about that for a little bit. Okay, well, if you can't think of a situation that I'm talking about, I'll just show you some pictures of a driver that did something stupid. So if we look at one of our projects on a 2-lane rural road, we had a pretty good project there to repair the roadway, and we couldn't get all the work done in one day, so we had to leave the roadway closed overnight. So we put up our type 3 barricades to let people know that our roadway was closed. However, when our workers arrived the next morning to get to work to finish the job, this is what they found in their work zone. So someone in a minivan had gone around the barricades, and they quickly found out as to why the roadway was closed, and they got stuck. So they had to abandon ship in the middle of the night. How about that? And so we had to call, as you can see, we have our state highway patrolman arrived on the scene to help us take care of this matter. So that was kind of stupid. You know, I must say though, in our experience of working on 2-lane rural roads, I think the people from the county and townships can back me up on this, is that the people that live on the 2-lane rural roads, especially the lower volume ones, they tend to think they own the entire roadway. So it's hard for them. Those are the situations where we get people showing they're more brave and you know, trying to get through the work zone of a road that is closed. I think people from the county and township can chime in on that if they want. Okay, so our traffic control devices, they are essential to highway safety. The motorists recognize these subconsciously. For instance, like when the motorist is driving down the road and they see an orange sign, no matter what it says, as soon as they see an orange sign, they are supposed to automatically in a split second realize that a work zone is coming up. Motorists rely on them to be in place. We need to give them advance warning, especially on our higher speed roads. They have to be able to slow down. They really need the advance warning. So what would happen if we didn't have our traffic control devices? How else could we communicate? Or there could be confusion, chaos, or of course, a higher chance of a crash happening. So we have certain requirements of our traffic control devices. We don't use them unless there's a need for these devices to be utilized. They must command attention. And of course, our latest devices have all undergone a kind of a redesign in the last 4 or 5 years with more retro reflectivity, or some are even larger than they used to be. They need to convey a clear and simple message, or be a symbol, for instance, a symbol of what's going on, like the symbol of a flagger, very clear and simple. And they must be placed in order to give the motorists adequate time to respond the way we need them to respond. Here's a sign. Do we all know what this sign means? Yes, of course. Very famous sign. It's a symbol of a larger word, and it works very well. We see a lot of these signs right from the freeway at interchanges, very high up in the air, for instance. But we've taken note of the success that McDonald's has had with their golden arches symbol, and some of our work zone signage has been redesigned to include symbols instead of words, and even some of our permanent signage has been changed to include symbols. These especially work well with people that maybe they can't read the English language very well. So again, the name of our manual is the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So we're striving for uniformity through standardization. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Let's all say that. Uniformity through standardization. Okay, so by doing this, we are promoting a better recognition and understanding of our devices, a more consistent interpretation, more rapid driver response, motorist respect, and even reduced traffic control costs if we're all utilizing the same signage and devices and not trying to invent a new sign that says the same thing, right? So let's see if ODOT is holding up their end of the bargain. We've gone back into the ODOT archives and found some old pictures. Let's see. So here we have a sign with some duct tape on it. Is that is that being uniform there? I don't think so. So we can do better, right, ODOT? And we are doing better. You're not going to see this anymore. This is from the old days, of course. How about this one? They upgraded from duct tape to electrical tape. It looks better, right? However, it looks like it's not as sticky as duct tape. It's
Yeah, at
peeling
least the
off.
color matches better, Ray.
Yeah, it looks a lot better, doesn't it? But probably won't show up very good at nighttime, though. How about this one here? We got duct tape covering up the lane arrows. And I guess they thought that's all the motorists would need to have, all the information they need as they approach the work zone. But that does not command a lot of motorist respect, does it? So we need our traffic control devices to be uniform in their design, their application, and location as we strive to achieve our uniformity through standardization. So what do I mean when I say traffic control devices? I'm talking about our signs, our channelizing devices, our cones or drums, Aero panels, portable changeable message boards, pavement markings, or barriers and barricades. Let's take a look first at our signs. So what do the signs do for us that we place in our advanced warning area of our work zones? They advise and warn drivers. They have 4 ways that they communicate a message to the motorists: through their words, color, shape, and symbols. And they communicate the same message redundantly through their shape and color. So let's take a quiz. I guess I could have made another Minty on this one as well. All right, so we'll start off with an easy one, the one on the top left. Just by the shape of that sign, we know what kind of sign that is, right? It's a stop sign, right? How about the triangle? That's another famous shape of a sign. What kind of sign is that? That's a yield sign, right? The bottom right corner, sometimes I get people on this one. What's a circular sign? What kind of sign would that be? Well, it turns out it's a railroad crossing sign. How about the one that looks like a house? Of course, we know that's a school zone sign. Let me go ahead and put the answers up here. But the one in the top right, it's a diamond-shaped sign. It could be a yellow diamond-shaped sign, or it could be an orange diamond-shaped sign. But in both situations, they are warning signs. Of course, the rectangular sign is a regulatory sign. It's like your speed limit sign, no parking, or right lane must turn right, those sort of signs. Those are regulatory. If you don't obey those signs, you're getting a ticket, right? Also, the colors of signs send a message. So we've been busy buying signs for townships all over the state, especially in their curves. One of the most famous signs that we buy them is the advance warning sign for the curve ahead. It's a yellow diamond-shaped sign with an arrow on it, a curved arrow. So that's definitely a warning sign. Anytime you see a yellow sign, you need to pay attention to it. Of course, it's the same with red and orange, but we really need to pay attention to the warning signs. Of course, red is prohibition, regulatory. It could be stop or do not enter, things like that. If you're on a freeway, you might see some blue signs for motorist services guidance, or the rest area signs, things like that. Brown for recreation, cultural interest. And of course, orange is the international color for work zones ahead, or for construction or maintenance. Regulatory signs are white, like your speed limit. And in pedestrian crossings, bicycle crossings, and school zones have their own special color called FYG. Does everybody know what FYG stands for? Well, it's so important I gave it its own special slide. It stands for fluorescent yellow green. And so anytime you approach a pedestrian or bicycle crossing um, or a school zone, um, you're going to see this sign, and it's fluorescent yellow green. You know what? We've noticed that when the motorists see this color, they behave very well. You know, nobody wants to be that guy that speeds through a school zone. You know, that takes that's not a very good person that does that, right? So no one wants to be labeled as that guy. But the thing with this color is we also want our roadway workers to have this color on. So their work vest or work apparel needs to be fluorescent yellow green. And the reason for that is that when motorists see that, they know that there are people working in the work zone, and they behave a lot better than if they think there's no people there. And so it's just one of the many reasons why the Federal Highway Administration created a work zone rule, and that is for workers to adhere to the latest requirements for work zone apparel. And you can read all about that in the manual as well. And we have different types of signs: regulatory, warning, and guide signs. Let's talk about our regulatory signs first. They are the rectangular signs with a white background. They hold legal obligations or place where the regulation becomes effective. Let's take a look at some of these regulatory signs. You see the stop and yield signs at the top. You got the speed limit sign. How about this one on the top row on the far right? It says reduce speed ahead. Have you guys seen this sign out on the roadways within the last year? That's an important question, because if you have seen this exact sign, the way it looks right there, and you're a roadway worker in that city, village, or whatever, then you need to replace that sign, because that sign has been totally redesigned. It is now a warning sign. So it's a yellow diamond-shaped sign, and in the middle of that sign, it has the picture of the upcoming speed limit, like 35. As you approach a village from a 2-lane county road or 2-lane state route, you should see the yellow diamond-shaped sign, typically a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit in the middle of that yellow sign. It has an arrow pointing up at the top of the sign. And then down here in the far bottom left, we see a sign that says left lane must turn left. So that's an important sign for us. Sometimes we have to use this in our work zones. It's called out in some of the typical applications that involve intersection work, like typical application 22, for instance, or 23. So sometimes we have to add regulatory signs when we work in a city or a village, so that we can provide the motorists with enough information to get through our work zones safely. So their use must be authorized by the proper officials. So always check before installing or removing. Then we have our warning signs that we're all more familiar with, our orange diamond-shaped signs for road work. So we use these signs in our advanced warning area of the work zone as so to warn drivers that we are out there and it's a potentially dangerous condition ahead. Let's take a look at some of our work zone signs, and you can tell me if you have these in your arsenal of signs. So it's, we have some symbols that I talked about. So this one here, the flagger sign, you should all, if you routinely do set up a flagging operation, you need to have this sign, not the old sign that says flagger ahead on it. Okay, so it's been studied, and this one results in a safer flagging operation. And then we have this sign here, the man with the shovel sign. We'll see that one of the places to use that sign is in a mobile operation, and it would be attached to the back of the shadow vehicle. And that lets people, the motorists, know that there are people working in front of that big truck that they can't see as they approach from behind. They need, and like I said before, if we tell people that there's people in the work zone, they behave a lot better. So this definitely adds safety to your mobile operation. Then we have signs specifically for shoulder work where you're not blocking a lane. Another one here, I think everyone should have this sign, be prepared to stop. So this sign is called out a lot of times as an option or guidance in certain work zones. One of those is flagging. When you look at the typical application for flagging in the drawing, you don't see that sign, but when you read the notes page, you'll see it's called out in two places to use, and that's to add safety and more warning to the motorists. So if you are working on a 55-mile-per-hour 2-lane roadway, you need to have this sign, and you add it to your sign series. So instead of 3 signs, you would have 4 signs in each direction. Definitely adds safety. So there's some of the signs that we have out there. And then this one here says sign spacing is critical. And so each typical application tells you exactly how far apart to place your signs. And so, we don't want to create a situation here like Ziggy is facing, where he sees left lane ends, right lane under construction, think fast. So we definitely want to place our signs to give the motorists enough time to analyze the signs and decide on their maneuver as they approach our work zone. So for instance, here we have our typical application number 10, our flagging operation. And just like all the other typical applications that involve a sign series, it calls out the spacing of the signs here with the letters A, B, and C. And so how do we convert that to a distance in feet? Well, we go back to something I showed you earlier, and that is this table found on page 17 of our little green flip book. And this table tells us how to determine what A, B, and C, the values of A, B, and C are. So if you're flagging on a 2-lane rural road, we look at the road type and we look at rural, and we'll see that those signs need to be 500 feet apart. Now, if we work in a city where it's 35 miles per hour, then we go up to urban, low speed, which is 40 miles per hour and below, and we'll see that those signs can be 100 feet apart. So that makes a really big difference, doesn't it? Now, if we're doing a right lane closure on I-71 and it's 65 miles per hour, then we'll see that A, B, and C have different values. So A is 1,000, B is 1,500, and C is a half mile, 2640. So basically, all of your roadways can be broken down into 4 types of roads. It's either urban low speed, urban high speed, rural, or express freeways and expressways. And we utilize a 3-step signing package for a reason in most cases. The first sign people see, the road work ahead sign, that's what we use to get the motorist's attention. The second sign tells the motorist what the situation is that lies ahead. So sometimes it's right lane closed or 1-lane road ahead. And then the third sign is where we tell the motorist what we want them to do. So merge left, or if it's the flagger symbol sign, that means be prepared to do what the flagger is going to tell you to do. We also have certain specifications for the height of our signs. So they need to be no less than 1 foot above the traveled way. So your signs can't be on the ground. They need to be on a some sort of a a post or something, a sign stand. That's for your most of your roadway maintenance activities where you're going to be gone at the end of the day. But if you have like a long-term project, then you can have post-mounted signs. And depending on whether you're in a rural area or urban area, the height of your sign needs to be 5 feet minimum above the traveled way in a rural area, or 7 feet above the traveled way in an urban area. And of course, your post-mounted signs need to be crash worthy. Here's a picture of a good portable sign. Does everybody's portable signs look like this sign? You have the nice flags on top of your sign. And you can see that it's on a sign stand that the sign is raised 1 foot above the ground. That puts the main message of the sign right at the optimum height for a motorist. So if you don't have flags, how else can you draw more attention to your sign? And one of the ways to do that is to put like a new cone. Put your newest, prettiest cone right beside your sign. And that draws attention to your sign just like a flag would. Of course, if you're on a long-term project, you could always put flashing lights or something like that on your sign. All right, I think we've learned enough today that it's time for another quiz. So let's take a look at these pictures. Let's first look at the top left picture. It's all about sign spacing and height above pavement, but I can see other problems with this picture. So we talked about some typical applications, a couple of them, and I mentioned high-speed 2-lane rural roads. So with that information, I want you to tell me, do you see anything else wrong with this picture? So let's do a Menti question. Is this work zone set up correctly for a high-speed, moderately high volume 2-lane rural roadway? So what's missing? And let's also assume that that crew is going to be there for 4 hours that day. They'll be in that one spot for 4 hours. So with that information, okay, the answers are rolling in. Yeah, where's the taper? Sign needs space further away. Yeah, okay, you guys are on a roll now. The sign is not mounted, it's on the ground. Yes, good catch. Aero board. I have to say, sorry, no Aero. We don't want an Aero board in this situation. So that's one thing that I guess I need to talk about. This is not a multi-lane roadway. It's just a 2-lane, 2-way roadway. Let's see, flagger. Finally, someone says flagger. Yes. Flagger needed. Need flagged. Okay. These are very good answers. All right. Need 500 feet. Good one. Okay, so what I was shooting for here was, the crew is out there working. They're in a work zone. So one of the main takeaways of this course is that when you're working, your work zone should be based upon the design of one of the typical applications. And there's only one typical application with all the parameters that I have listed there. There's only one typical application that is suited for this situation. And that's the flagging operation, typical application number 10, because they are not a mobile operation. They're fixed. They're going to be in that one spot for 4 hours. It's not a low volume road. I said moderately high volume, and it's high speed. And so, we definitely need to have the advanced warning area set up in a way, and by the end of all this webinar series, you'll know that they needed 4 signs in each direction, not just the bare minimum 3. So they need the 3 signs that's shown in the picture, which are road work ahead, 1 lane road ahead, and the flagger symbol, but they really needed to add the be prepared to stop sign as well. And then they needed to have a flagger, and then just like the picture says, a 50-foot to 100-foot long taper. And then they needed to have a buffer space, and then the work area. And then needed, of course, to have the other side of the work zone set up the same way for the other direction. So if I had to give that work zone a grade, it would be epic failure, because they left no room for error in this high-speed situation. So it's dangerous for the workers and also dangerous for the motorists. So, and someone said Aero board. And so one of the things we learn is that on a 2-lane rural road, we do not use a flashing Aero board. And that because when a person sees a flashing arrow, they think that it's okay to go around them at any time. And in this situation, if they did that, you could be causing a head-on collision with people coming the other way. So that's why in a flagging operation, we don't use an Aero board. So we'll get into more detail on that when we get to that part of our webinar series. So very good. I think that's the end of this one. So I'm going to have to transfer back to the. So one thing I learned about the Menti software, you can't have more than 100 slides in your presentation. You got to break it down. I got to hurry up, don't I? All right, so some more about signs. Let's quick one here. Is that the proper height of the sign? No. In an urban situation, your stop sign needs to be a minimum of 7 feet above the traveled way. Also, some more about signs. We have to properly maintain them. Can you read that sign? I can't read it. So the manual states that signs shall be properly maintained for cleanliness, visibility, and correct positioning, and signs that have lost significant legibility shall be promptly replaced. So hopefully everybody here has a good program where they work about determining when signs need to be replaced and how to replace them. How about these signs? Are these signs good to go for this year and next? So the answer is no. These signs do not meet the latest specs for for legibility and for retroreflectivity. So they need to be promptly replaced. How about these? When you work at night, how many of you work at night? When you work at night, you use the same signs that you do during the day, but they have to meet the standards for retroreflectivity or be illuminated. So what's retroreflectivity? It means that when the headlights hit the sign, no matter what angle, they reflect back to the source of the light. So here we have, we'll use my car as an example. We have the car light hitting the sign and bouncing back directly to the motorist. Okay, that wasn't my car. Okay, so what is the principle of retroreflectivity in action? Okay, well, if you don't use a retro-reflective sign and you're working at night, your signs will literally disappear at night. So um, that's the whole reason behind retro-reflectivity. And of course, our standards for retro-reflectivity have been updated in the last 4 or 5 years so that they're even brighter.
5-minute warning, Ray.
Okay. Then we have our channelizing devices. You know, there's different types of cones and drums, but we use these to direct traffic from one lane to another. And they are also retro-reflectorized for night use. Here's some pictures of different channelizing devices. Down front, we have our standard 28-inch cones with 2 bands of retro-reflectivity. We see our orange drums over here, the Ohio State flower. This is what they should look like. We have our grabber cones here and our barricades. So if you're using cones, that means that you're out there with the cones. So these are typically for operations that are 12 hours or less. We don't usually want to use these cones when you're not there overnight. You should be using drums in that situation. So several good advantages for using cones. They're easy to place out there and they don't do any damage to cars, but there's also disadvantages. You know, they're not as respected as the drums. It's easy for drivers to drive into the work zone, easily knocked over with wind and stuff like that. But you know, there's minimum sizes. I don't suggest anybody use an 18-inch cone. I'm all about it. You know, you should use the 28-inch cones or the 42-inch grabber cones. As you can see, they're retro-reflectorized for night use. These are not acceptable. These old cones you see there for nighttime work. So you have to add the retro-reflectivity. Here's the drums. You know, they command more respect and more visible to motorists, but they are more difficult to install. How about this one? Is this drum still good to be used? Well, the answer is no, because we want the shape to be instantly recognized by the motorist. And then so this is the shape of drums we're shooting for. If we take a closer look though, we don't like how these drums are placed there. One's out of line, so we need our drums to be in a straight line so it doesn't cause driver confusion. Somebody might think they can drive into that work zone. Then we have barricades that are used for different reasons. One of the main reasons is to close a street down, and we can hang signs on these. We have a type 1, different rails, number of rails. So type 1 is a single rail, maybe on your low speed, low volume roadways. Type 2 for maybe for higher speeds, but anytime we're closing a street, we use a 3 rail for road closure. And the stripes on a barricade actually mean something. So the stripes are placed so they're sloped downward in the direction that traffic is to pass. So if you look at the bottom right one, this is how we would close a street down by putting it together to make a V shape with the 2 barricades that are placed together. The top left are in a situation where motorists could go on either side of that sign. And the barricades might damage a vehicle if a vehicle's to run into it. But when we place them, we weigh them down with sandbags, and the sandbags are placed at the bottom of the barricade. Is this the proper way to weigh down a barricade? The answer is no, right? Because we don't. If someone hit that, the concrete block would go through the window, and that's not good. And of course, there's different warning lights if you have a more of a longer term project. You know, we have type A, type B, and type C lights. Type A is low intensity flashing. We want those to be used at nighttime because if it was high intensity at night, you would blind motorists. High intensity flashing is during the day, and type C is a steady burn for delineation. So this sign here is during the day, so that would be type B, high intensity. Then we have other devices we use in heavy urban traffic. So if you're in a city, I'm sure you have heavy urban traffic, so we use other high-level devices. So our Aero panels, portable traffic signals, and portable changeable message signs. So these are used Aero panels are used in addition to channelizing devices and signs, and this is what we use to direct traffic into the proper lane. They're shown right on the typical application. So as I said before, they're not shown on the flagging operation, typical application. So we don't use them there. So these are in multi-lane roadway situations, and we have different sizes, 48 by 24, maybe for your 2-lane roadways, and 96 by 48 for multi-lane highways. And these are high intensity lights that can be seen from a minimum of a half mile away. And we dim them at night or during bad weather so we don't blind motorists. But when you buy a Aero panel, we want to make sure that it does all of these operations: Aero left, Aero right, double Aero, and then there's 2 forms of lighting for caution, either the straight bar or the 4 corners.
Okay, Ray, you got to pick a good
Yeah.
spot to wrap up because it's
Okay.
11:31.
All right. So we can start off by showing them how the Aero panel is on caution mode for shoulder work, and it actually shows it this way in typical application number 6, which is all about shoulder work. So yeah, we can stop here and we'll leave off, and then we'll get in also into some typical work zone
Awesome.
layouts for our
All right.
next part in the series.
Absolutely. And everybody will be prepared now to use Menti too, because I'm sure you'll have plenty of additional Menti interactivities or questions in there for them. So,
Yes,
all right,
I have some more questions.
everyone, please stay safe over the weekend. And we definitely look forward to having you on the next session in this series. Thanks, Ray, for all the good work and for making this fun and interactive for everybody.
All right, you're
We'll talk
welcome,
to
and
everybody
thank you
soon.
for all the participants for taking part, and we'll see you in our next session.
Yep. Bye-bye.